challenging thing now. Last presentation on a tropical day after very exciting presentations. So I really hope that you can still be awake at the moment. So at least first I was a little bit scared. Afterwards I thought, well, sweat might be the thing that might be one of your most acute issues at the moment. So there I might be able to relate something. And like ultimately we discussed yesterday during the dinner, and I was like, after my introduction, I was told, you're the sweat guy. So if you will remember that at the end of my presentation, I think I'm happy. So my name is Noé Brasier. I'm a medical doctor by training, trained here in Basel, which is very nice to be back. I have a board certification in general internal medicine. So I'm not from pediatrics, so primarily focusing on adults at the moment. However, I think I'm here to kind of spark the idea and hope to find more discussions and get these projects into pediatric care as well. However, there is already like a lot of work being done in Lucerne, for example. So there will be some very exciting trials coming up. So I'm pretty sure pediatrics will profit from this approach on the long term. So I have no conflicts of interest. So we worked with some engineers, but I'm not involved in any startup or any company for that. What I usually like is to have a look back. We heard today that technology is advancing very quickly. However, in clinics, it's still slow. It's just slow. It's much regulated, which is good because it provides you some safety. Innovation takes a lot of work to bring new solutions to the clinics. And this is just to give you a little bit of an idea of patience, I guess, because that's an old one that's from 1925, like a little bit more than 100 years ago. They thought like in 1975, people like doctors will work from remote to this mirror and treat patients or like examine, assess patients, right? And we're now even 50 years later and we're now slowly coming closer. So it's just giving a little bit of an idea, like technology needs some time, and I think sometimes we need to be patient to make sure that the solution we develop and we implement into clinics is meaningful and helpful ultimately, and we just don't just rush and then have a solution that doesn't fit the patient and the clinician need. So this is just like my 4 points I would like to briefly discuss with you today. The first one is just to give you a little bit of an idea of sweat. I'm not sure how many people have like in-depth asked yourself like what your sweat is doing and how it's produced. On the other hand side, we are working on different sweat concepts coming from clinics. So I'm really the clinician at ETH. That might hurt some people's brain maybe that clinicians are at ETH, but I think like there is some very nice collaboration with engineers, and we try to build up concepts to help translate the technology into a meaningful clinical tool. We have a sweat project going on, and ultimately I think that's a nice way to stop this, to end this presentation, as well as like translating disciplines. It's like talking the same language. Medical doctors love their terminology. I'm pretty sure you're aware of that. And everyone might be speaking about the same, but in different words. And I think it's very important to kind of align with the different disciplines to make productive research project and be successful in translating technology into clinics. So a few words to sweat. So we all sweat every day at the moment, at rest or if we exercise. There is a high variability in sweat itself. Everyone sweats differently. I guess you already saw, like experienced that. I'm a good sweater, just to say. So there might be some relation to the topic as well. We have a lot of influential factors ranging from physiological ones, which I call them. So it's of course heat, radiation, environmental factors. On the other hand side, there is some pathophysiological factors, if we want to call them. So changes in your genes, some neurological changes in your nerves, fever. Well, night times is something that leads to night sweat in infectious disease, for example. And as well, pharmacotherapy is something that directly affects how much you sweat. For example, if you think about beta blockers, they kind of reduce how much you sweat because of the small muscles you have in your sweat glands. So the sweat production ultimately is reduced. There are like two point of views in the meaning of a lot of variation might be a challenge. on my point of view, is like there is a lot of health information in there to personalize measurements. So I'm pretty convinced that from this high variation, we can get a lot of understanding of a single patient. However, we still have a lot of work to decode that and to better understand. And there is like where the context comes in place, but I will come to that later on. So I kind of put the information from sweat into 3 pillars. So one is the physical information, like which is the sweat rate, how much you sweat. So you sweat differently on the back or on your feet or on your hands, for example. So this is something we want to understand. And for example, in neuropathy, for example, we sweat less because nerves are not innervating your sweat gland. So there is some information on the sweat rate. Further, there is biochemical information. So we have a broad spectrum of molecules we can find in sweat, ranging from cytokines, CRP, steroid hormones, electrolytes, and even drugs. So antibiotics is something we can find in sweat. So we sweat a lot of different things out. However, we still have to better understand what the molecular composition means. It's not always like 100% the filtrate of blood. So this is something, another variability in there which we need to understand. And ultimately, as I said, social information. So if I'm standing here wet, you might get the impression that I'm stressed, but today is only the sun, I can assure you. So there is some clinical testing for pediatrician. Of course, you know the macroduct sweat collector. So this is more or less the only certified sweat test in clinics to diagnose cystic fibrosis. On the left-hand side, that's more for the neurologists. Under you, this is the thermoregulatory stress test. So you put an indicator powder on the skin, put people into a heating room, you heat them up, literally, and when they start sweating, the indicator powder turns violet, and then you get kind of these patterns, right? So if it's like completely dark, everything is fine, you sweat physiologically. If it's white here, it's less sweat on your feet, which is, for example, the fact with neuropathy in diabetes. So this is possible, but very laborious, and of course not continuous and not feasible at home. Why don't we have more sweat analysis in clinics? As I said, it's like diagnostics, it's tricky. On the left-hand side, you see a little bit like what we face when we do some early pilot trials. So this one, it looks always a little bit strange, let's say. So if you want to collect the sweat from the whole body, it's challenging, right? So you put people in this plastic tent, you close the tent, you let them drive on a bicycle, then sweat drops down, and then you have this whole body wash down, how it's called, so you can collect the sweat from the ground. So challenging. It's feasible in lab, but not at home. If you want to do the local sweat gland, so from the arm, you can either induce it with the macroduct sweat collector, which we saw before. Here you see my arm with 2 electrodes. In a pharmacological compound, you can stimulate the local sweat gland. So the good thing here is you don't have to ride a bike, so you can just sit, which, for example, in older people, like very ill people, that's a better way than putting them on the bike and ask someone with 40 degrees of fever to cycle for an hour, for example. The sweat rate is quite simple. You use these Tegaderm plasters. There is a technical absorbent in there, which you weigh before. You apply it to the skin, you weigh it afterwards. And like the weight it gained kind of provides you with information about the sweat volume over a specific body surface over a specific amount of time, providing you with a sweat rate. However, that's tricky, I can tell you. And our research staff can tell you as well. This is the aim. So there is a lot of electronics coming, more or less is developed. So it's very early on the academic stage. So you can have fingertip sweat analysis, for example, for glucose. This one is an active sweat stimulator for, I think this one was for nutrients in sweat. And another one here on the upper arm. There are another ones for steroid hormones as well. And this one was, like in my point of view, for sweat, one of the landmark publications in 2016. And since then, a lot of technological development has been seen, and more platforms are coming up now. So this is kind of a wristband you can couple with a smartphone ultimately, and that should provide you with continuous biochemical analytics of your sweat. So still not on the market. So we worked on a framework on a recipe, let's say, how to set up or like how to translate these sensors into clinical applications together with engineers, regulatory, patients, social workers. So really try to be comprehensive and bring all people together to the same table and discuss how to make it happen that we will be able to use these sensors in the future. And as you can see, we have a broader overview on like the sensors which are coming now, and you see you will have sensors for the whole lifespan, which is very exciting in principle, right? So they're not ready to use it, just to be clear. However, you even have like smart pacifiers for saliva analysis in neonates. So this is one I really like from the idea. Still a lot of challenges to tackle. However, a lot of electronics is coming. So it started with engineers having platforms saying, look, we can do sweat analysis. And so I thought, yeah, well, I sometimes see people sweat in clinics, but you cannot very nicely quantify it. So a lot of assessments of sweat is done still by questionnaire. So you ask the people, how much did you sweat today? Which is challenging, right? So you will get quite a subjective answer. And so by that, we have been working on different concepts to lay the floor, let's say, to have new aspects where sweat might be meaningful. So we were working on cardiovascular patients. Heart failure, for example, is a state where you are not able to like fully get the fluid out of your body. So you get this edema, and it's a kind of a state of hyperhydration in a certain way. And we try to understand like how we could use sweat analysis for home monitoring, because these patients need to stand on a scale at home and measure their weight to understand like what the body fluids are doing, and this is the main way you can assess them. So there are some struggles with there, especially when they're super acutely decompensated. So there are challenges, right, to go on a scale, etc. So heart failure is one. Another one is myocardial infarction. They are cold, sweaty, arriving at the emergency room. So these are like all use cases I encountered during my clinical work. This one as well. So like people with substance abuse and craving, they start really to sweat and shake very early. And so we thought like, why not using the sweat rate, for example, as an early indicator to maybe even prevent these craving episodes and relapse in opioid use. Another one is about using sweat for antibiotic drug monitoring. So here the idea is to better understand, to use sweat next to blood as well to better understand how antibiotics penetrate, for example, from the blood into the tissue, which is something that is unsolved. And we really try to find gradients to better understand and personalize, ultimately, antibiotic treatment. So the sweat is not enough. We heard about context today. So in clinics, everything is about context. The context will give you the value of your health information. So if you have one value, it's not so meaningful. If you combine it with other parameters, it's much more helpful. And so this is where the field is heading now, is in direction of multimodal sensing, in the meaning of that you combine, for example, vital sign monitoring with biochemistry, allowing you to assess the heart rate, core body temperature, at the same time cytokines, and make that a meaningful, comprehensive health overview. And these patches are more and more coming, like here, and you can see that these patches can phenotype your stress reaction and even help to differentiate between different stressors. So this work was done at Caltech from one of our collaborators earlier. Ultimately, I guess it's combining not only body measurements, but as well environment, so that you really have a comprehensive understanding of the person in its lived environment, which is helpful, I guess, as well for mental health, to have this biopsychosocial model that you can understand, like what is the body reaction, what is going outside in the environment, to better understand and phenotype what is going on with the person at the moment and really understand it in the context. So of course we have some projects as well. This is our main project at the moment, which is in aging, so it's the other side of the lifespan at the moment. But anyway, we hope to be able to apply that as well to like the whole lifespan. So Vanessa is working on an age clock on resilience from sweat. So this is a SNSF and NSF lead agency project running at the moment. And at the moment we are just concluding the first clinical study. So we do some biomarker exploration. We try to identify meaningful biomarkers, which we then do clinically validate. And ultimately, together with our colleague from Caltech, we will functionalize a device to make it targeted and make it meaningful. So this is a really collaboration between clinician, physiologists, and engineers, from the very basic to a wearable device that hopefully adds interesting health information. And for that, to understand resilience, we will expose people of advanced age to heat stress. So we put them into a heat chamber and see how they react, to better understand like how resilient they are against heat stress. And heat stress is kind of a systematic stressor, right? Because your whole body, your whole physiology needs to work to be able to cope with heat. And we see that as a proxy for how someone copes with stress, which could be as well from major surgery, for example, or oncological drug therapy, which are significant systematic stressors. So why sweat? Sweat has information. So we sweat differently from the very young age to the adult and the late age. So there is fluctuation in there. So there is information on sweat. Why heat stress? I told you before, it's kind of a proxy for systematic stress. On the other hand, we had an earlier trial where we were able to phenotype the different heat stresses. So there seemed to be like a correlation between the application of heat stress and the change of biomarkers in your sweat. So we take this as a fundamental frame. Now, why is that important, or why do we think that could be a meaningful way to improve treatment? Like as we age, we are more likely to have multiple diseases which interact with each other. So sometimes it can be challenging to understand, is it the heart, is it the kidney, is it the gut, or is it everything? And so we said, okay, we have a lot of specific disease biomarkers. So we now try to better understand how resilient someone is. We want to measure health and understand like how robust you are against these stressors to hopefully improve outcome, for example, in major surgery, or to better understand who is becoming ill or not. Like all that together, translating disciplines, I think that's something very dear to my heart. And it's something I experience at ETH very often, that it's very exciting to communicate between the different disciplines. And it's a major obstacle. It sounds simple, trivial, it's not. Very often we speak about the same. There are a lot of misunderstandings which might not be there because like you speak from the same thing, but it's just like you speak different languages or are like having different aims in your head. So, and we are working with a lot of engineers as well to kind of outline how to collaborate better. Of course, from the clinical point of view, because I'm a clinician. So this is a work we did with our colleagues from Northwestern and from the University Hospital of Zurich to kind of provide a framework that shall help, especially engineers or people working on the development of health technology, to better integrate clinicians at the right moment of the development process, to make sure that like the clinical point of view is integrated early, to make sure that technology will go beyond an interesting research project. This is an early work we had now, so AI is everywhere, so I just touch it briefly. I think you have heard from the experts, so I'm not the AI expert. However, like AI allows you to find these patterns, combine the different modalities, and it's a big opportunity, I think, to make wearable sensing more meaningful. of course, when addressing all the remaining issues and challenges we have. However, it will help to improve that wearable sensing is meaningful and helpful, and not just a measure you have from Whoop or whoever. It's more than just a heart rate, right? It's making sense of measurements. So this is something like we had a couple of events now where BRCCH has been supporting us as well. So for what I'm very thankful to be able to bring like all the experts as well to Zurich. And we usually discuss some simple questions, let's say, but I think it's very worth to discuss it. And especially on the left-hand side, I'm sure you've heard about continuous monitoring, and everyone is saying, yeah, we do continuous monitoring. So maybe next time ask the person, what do you mean by continuous? So no one knows, or like only a few, right? And it's just, yeah, we do multiple measurements. So yes, but I mean, in theory, you could say you do 2 measurements during your lifetime, right? So it's continuously every 50 years. And I think it's an important question. We like to define everything, and that's kind of not defined. So you will not find a definition, and even like we ask our engineers, clinicians, regulatory experts, and they all gave a different answer. So I think it's important that we understand about what we talk, especially in the background that the European Innovation Council Pathfinder Challenge had a call, I think it's 3 years ago, saying like, okay, you get 4 million euros if you build a tool that can continuously measure health. And no one knows what that means, right? So I think at 4 million euros, it's worth to define it well. And so I think it's important to understand what the other people think and mean when they say something so that you can better collaborate. Stakeholders involvement, it's not super new, but I think it's important to say, ask a patient, ask their parents, especially in pediatric care, involve them early, just ask him, would you use that or not? I think it sounds trivial, still something we try to fight for and try to introduce that. So there's OIPATI as well in Europe, so there is this European Society to train patients to become patient advocates, for example. So they're really trained patients that should be able to provide you interesting and helpful information that should bring your project further. So this is really something I try to further underline. So, and as ETH Zurich has a bachelor in medicine, we're now training our med students in digital biomarkers or the use of wearable sensors as well. And I think here, like what is due to my heart is that they get a reflected understanding of what a device can and what not. It's not about saying it can everything or it can nothing. I think like there's a lot of polarization out there, but I think it's understanding what these devices can do for you, for the patient, what do they mean and what they can't. And I think it's never early enough to start the discussion. So the course changed over the time. So this time we had about 18 sensors distributed to groups, and they just had to do sensing. So it ranged from ISF glucose monitoring to sweat sensing to whatever. They had to set up the app, they had to get the data out of that, analyze the data, interpret the data, present the data. So the whole chain sounds trivial, it's not. It can be challenging depending on the company. And so it's really like training our med students to get in touch with that, understand as well the regulatory perspectives in the meaning of if a patient comes with a clock telling you it's a heart rate of 200, to understand, is that something you can trust or not? Is it certified? What do you do with that? And what do you answer your patient as well to have that early development of a very differentiated understanding of these wearable sensors. So I think it's good. So we are already late. So some key takeaways, and I think it's really, this is from the adult medicine. I'm looking forward to discuss about pediatrics, how to bring that to pediatrics. As I said, there are some projects coming up. Sweat is an interesting non-invasive window into health. We need to better understand it still. Multimodal sensing is the thing that is coming up. So you will see not only heart rate but as well as a combination between vital parameters and biochemical analytics. Just one example from the US. So I guess you know the Oura Ring. Maybe most of you. It's one of the most famous sensor, which is now coupled with Dexcom's glucose monitoring. So they really try to have this vital monitoring with glucose monitoring together to have a better understanding of health. Resilience, we try to make that readable, that we better understand how healthy someone is to predict outcome and improve outcome on the long. And I think from bench to wrist is something that everyone is working on and is challenged, what I heard today as well. And I think like good communication and collaboration are key. So I hope you don't mind. I do some advertisement. Still, it's important for us as well to kind of build up the ecosystem. So please join if you are around. We have a digital biomarker conference bringing together really engineers, clinicians, and everyone on the same table. So it would be good if you would join the discussion. So after that, thank you very much for your time. I hope it was of information for you, and now you're done with the day. Thank you very much.